Working memory is your ability to keep a chain of numbers in mind for some period of time, but you also have explicit procedural memory. So we've got short-term memory and long-term memory, and we've got this working memory, which is kind of keeping something online. Working memory is your ability to keep a chain of numbers in mind for some period of time, but the expectation really isn't that you would remember those numbers the next day, and certainly not the next week. So a good example would be a phone number. If I were to tell you a phone number, 493-2938, well, you could probably remember it, 493-2938. But if I came back tomorrow and asked you to repeat that chain of numbers, most likely you would not. Unless, of course, we used a particular tool to stamp down that memory into your mind and commit it to long-term memory. Now, of course, in this day and age, most people have phone numbers programmed into their phone. They don't really have to remember the exact numbers. It's usually done by contact, identity, and so forth. So a different example that some of you are probably more familiar with would be those security codes. So you try and log on to an app or a website, and it asks you for a security code that's been sent to your text messages, and then you can either plug that in directly in some cases, or you have to remember that short sequence of anywhere, usually from 6 to 7, sometimes 8 numbers. Your ability to do that, to switch back and forth between web pages or apps and plug in that number, by remembering the sequence and plugging it in by texting or keying it in on your keyboard, that's a really good example of working memory. Long-term memory of the sort that we're going to be talking a lot about today is your ability to commit certain patterns of information, either cognitive information or motor information, right? The ability to move your limbs in a particular sequence over long periods of time, such that you could remember it a day or a week or a month or maybe even a year or several years later. So we've got short-term memory and long-term memory, and we've got this working memory, which is kind of keeping something online, but then discarding it. Okay, not online on a computer, but online within your brain. There are also 2 major categories of memory that I'd like you to know about. One is explicit memory. So this is not necessarily explicit of the sort that you're used to thinking about, but rather the fact that you can declare you know something. So you have an explicit memory of your name. Presumably you have an explicit memory of the house or the apartment that you grew up in. You know something and you know it. And you can declare it. So I can ask you, what was the color of the first car that you owned? Or what is the color of your romantic partner's hair? These sorts of things. That's an explicit declarative memory. But you also have explicit procedural memories. Procedural memories, as the name suggests, involve action sequences. The simplest one, it's almost ridiculously simple, is walking. If I say, how is it that you walk from one room to the other? You'd probably say, well, I go that direction, then I turn left. I say, no. How is it exactly that you do it? I'd say, well, I move my left foot, then my right foot, then my left foot. And you could describe that. So it's an explicit procedural memory. So much so that if you were going to teach a young toddler how to walk, you would probably say, okay, good, try. Okay, and you know, probably that's going to be pre-language for the toddler. But you're going to encourage them to move one leg, then the other, and you're going to encourage and reward them for moving one leg then the other, because you have an explicit procedural memory of how to walk. Okay, almost ridiculously simple, maybe even truly ridiculously simple, but nonetheless, when you think about it in the context of neural circuits and neural firing, pretty amazing. Even more amazing is the fact that all explicit memories, both declarative and procedural explicit memories, can be moved from explicit to implicit.